doctoral titulada Membranas basadas en biopolímeros para la separación de CO2 y metano, estrategias de optimización para procesos multietapa. Para optar al título... está encendido. Vale. Para optar al título de doctora por la Universidad de Cantabria. Esta tesis doctoral se ha desarrollado en la Escuela Técnica Superior de Ingenieros Industriales y de Telecomunicación de la Universidad de Cantabria, en el Departamento de Ingenierías Química y Biomolecular, concretamente en el Grupo de Investigación, Desarrollo de Procesos Químicos y Control de Contaminantes, en el marco del programa de doctorado en Ingeniería Química de la Energía y de Procesos y bajo la supervisión de las doctoras Aurora Garea y Clara Casal. Para cumplir con los requisitos de mención internacional, se ha llevado a cabo una estancia de 3 meses de duración en el Instituto de Tecnología de Membranas de Italia, bajo la supervisión de Francesco Galliano. Este trabajo ha sido evaluado por 2 expertos externos, el doctor Óscar Andrés Prado Rubio, de la Universidad Nacional de Colombia, sede Manizales, y la doctora Patricia Luis Alconero, de la Universidad Católica de Lovaina. Además, un tribunal, la doctora Francesca Russo, procede de una institución internacional, el Instituto de Tecnología de Membranas. Esta tesis ha sido financiada por el Ministerio de Ciencia, Innovación y Universidades a través de un contrato predoctoral y de un proyecto del Plan Nacional. Y adicionalmente, este último año se ha recibido financiación de un proyecto del Horizonte Europa. El trabajo de esta tesis se ha publicado en 5 artículos en diferentes revistas científicas recogidas en el Journal of Citation Report Science Edition para cumplir con la normativa de la Universidad de Cantabria y del programa de doctorado que he mencionado previamente para la presentación de tesis doctorales por compendio de artículos. Ahora, teniendo en cuenta la presencia de un miembro internacional en el tribunal, pasaré al inglés. This presentation is divided in 4 different parts. The first part is a brief introduction detailing the context of the greenhouse gas emissions and the climate change, as well as the membrane technology and the multistage processes for CO2 methane separation, focusing on the main objectives. Later, the methodology that will be followed to achieve these objectives is also described, as well as the main results, and finally, some conclusions and proposals for further work. The population growth has increased the demand for industrial production and energy consumption, generating a dependence on fossil fuels that have accounted for more than 86% of the total world energy demand. But the use of these kind of resources caused the global warming due to the greenhouse gas emissions, generating serious environmental and social problems. To address these challenges, different climate policies, such as the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, were established to promote a sustainable development. These agreements, that are supported by the United Nations and aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, aim to limit the global temperature rise and a global transition to cleaner energy models. This graph shows a prediction of the CO2 equivalent emissions considering the different climate policies. Without any of these climate policies, the warming will be up to 5 degrees, with CO2 emissions up to 150 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. But by applying the different climate policies, the warming could be reduced to 1.5 degrees, with also a reduction in the CO2 emissions. In this context, the circular economy plays a crucial role because this model aims to transform our linear system into a circular one where the materials and waste are kept in use as long as possible by optimizing the design of the products, materials, systems, and business models. But to achieve this transition is important a technological transformation, and this is where process intensification strategies come into play. These strategies aim to rely on the renewable energies in order to reduce the dependence on the fossil fuels, as well as achieving a sustainable development. Among all, biogas is considered as an energy transition vector because it allows to produce energy from the anaerobic digestion of the organic waste. Depending on the source, the composition of biogas is different, being always the major component methane that is used for the energy production, but it also has a huge amount of CO2 that could be used for other industrial applications, as well as traces of another compounds. But the presence of these compounds in the biogas such as CO2, reduces the calorific value and the energy efficiency, and the presence of the hydrogen sulfide can cause the corrosion of the equipment. So it's necessary an upgrading step in order to obtain as a final result biomethane. The REPower EU plan of the European Union highlights the transition of energy in this European Union, establishing as targets producing 35 billion of square meters of this biomethane by the year 2030. Different technologies could be used for this upgrading step, like the absorption that separates the different components using a non-reactive or reactive liquid, the adsorption that uses a solid instead of a liquid, the cryogenic separation that separates the different compounds by cooling and compressing, and the hydrogenation that transforms CO2 into methane using hydrogen. But these technologies face some challenges, like the high energy consumption, the high cost, and the corrosion issues, and this is why membrane technology arose as an efficient alternative. The main potentialities of this technology is the high methane recovery rates with a scale-up flexibility and a modular nature, but on the other hand, the main weaknesses are the uncertainty in the presence of impurities, the cost of the membranes, and the requirement of multistage processes to achieve high purity of the component unit of the system. The gas transport mechanism through the membrane is generally defined by the solution diffusion model, where the components dissolve into the membrane and then diffuse due to the gradient of concentrations at both sides of the membrane that is driven by different pressures between the feed and the parent. The gas transport mechanism separation performance is characterized by three different parameters: the permeability that indicates the productivity, the selectivity that indicates the efficiency, and the stability that is the ability of maintaining this permeability and selectivity data over time. Depending on the material used for the membrane synthesis, they could be divided into organic or inorganic. The inorganic membranes, usually made of ceramic and zeolites, can work at high temperatures, but the main disadvantages are the high cost and the fragility. On the other hand, the polymeric membranes that have dominated the market over the last 30 years are easily available with low cost and easy processable, but on the other hand, the main disadvantages is the low mechanical, thermal, and chemical resistance. Additionally, the polymeric membranes suffer from the permeability-selectivity trade-off because a membrane with a high permeability provides a low selectivity and vice versa. In this way, in 1991, Robertson published a compilation of different CO2 permeability and CO2 methane selectivity data of different polymeric materials, establishing an upper bound that was used as a reference for the development of new sustainable materials, considering the target region. To overcome this problem, the concept of mixed matrix membrane is gaining attention, that consists on the combination of a polymeric matrix with different fillers dispersed in order to obtain a new hybrid or heterogeneous material with the combination of the easy processability of the polymers and the gas separation performance of the fillers. But the development of this novel material also faces some challenges, like the adhesion between the components, the polymer chain rigidification, and the pore blockage due to the presence of the polymeric matrix inside the filler pores. To address how these interfacial defects affect to the transport properties, different theoretical models used, like the Maxwell-Wagner-Szilard model, that is the most commonly used to predict the permeability of the mixed matrix membrane, considering the permeability of the dispersed and continuous phase, the volume fraction of the dispersed phase, as well as a shape factor of this dispersed phase. Different fillers could be used for the development of mixed matrix membranes in CO2 methane separation that could be divided into organic or inorganic, and the inorganic could be porous or non-porous. The fillers that are the focus of this study will be described in detail later. Membrane technology also faces the challenges of the environmental and economic sustainability because most of the materials used in the membrane synthesis are derived from petrochemical sources that are non-renewable and non-biodegradable. In that way, biopolymers emerge as an alternative that are polymeric materials with low environmental impact and properties that facilitate their degradation or recycling. Different biopolymers could be used in CO2 methane separation membrane processes that could be divided in different groups depending on the source. animals, biomass or plants, and chemical synthesis that could be from petrochemical resources or from natural resources. In this way, cellulose acetate is the most abundant biopolymer on Earth, produced from biomass or plants, and is a biocompatible material with high mechanical resistance, but it has a low solubility in many solvents. On the other hand, chitosan, that is produced from the chitin, is a biodegradable and biocompatible material with good field-forming properties and high CO2 affinity, but it has a low mechanical resistance that could be reinforced with the blending with other biopolymers or even by the fabrication of composite mixed matrix membranes. Different fillers were used in this study to overcome the challenges of the bio-based membranes that are ionic liquid, zeolites, titanocilicates, and metal-organic frameworks that were selected due to the compatibility with the polymeric matrix, to the CO2 affinity, the porosity, and the mechanical strength. But to advance in the development of new sustainable materials, modeling and simulation are essential tools because they allow to predict the membrane behavior under real conditions and assess the influence of the different key variables such as temperature, pressure, feed composition, permeability, selectivity, and number of stages in the purity, recovery, total cost, and energy requirements. The diagram here in the center shows the three-step simulation strategies. The first step involves determining the membrane parameters, including the membrane area as well as the energy consumption. The second step assesses the economic evaluation, determining the capital, the operation, and the energy costs. And finally, the third step closes the loop with the optimization. To address this type of analysis, process system engineers are essential tools because they are useful for the efficient design of membrane processes to correlate the study of the materials and processes. And for this aim, optimization is necessary to overcome the challenges of industrial scale membranes. Considering previous process engineering tasks, one stage is not enough to achieve high purity and recovery of both components at the outlet of the system due to the purity-recovery trade-off. So we need to implement a multi-stage permeation and simultaneous recovery process. Regarding the number of stages, it could be determined as fixed parameters or discrete variables that implies solving the model with mixed integral nonlinear or nonlinear programming algorithms. This table compiles some literature data in the field of the process system engineering applied to the separation of carbon dioxide and methane in different membrane processes. Regarding the software tools, generally, none of these software tools includes the membrane unit model, so programming software is used to develop this membrane unit model. And additionally, these studies use the experimental permeability and selectivity data of different commercial or conventional membranes. And here we are focusing on the use of the permeability and selectivity data of our developed bio-based membranes. So the main objective is the process optimization strategies for CO2 methane separation with membranes for the simultaneous recovery of both products for established quality specifications. And to address this general objective, two different specific objectives were developed. The simulation and techno-economical optimization of membrane systems in CO2 methane mixture separations, establishing as targets the purity and recovery of CO2 in the permeate and methane in the retentate, and the synthesis and characterization of composite mixed matrix membranes with biopolymers and compatible fillers, determining the structure and function relation for the simulation and optimization models. Once the objectives of this